My name is Joe Gilman. I'm Director of the Division of Geology and Land Survey for the Department of Natural Resources, and in that role I also serve as Missouri State Geologist. Following the tragic loss of life in Japan from the March 11 earthquake and subsequent tsunami, there has been a lot of heightened awareness around the world regarding earthquakes and the catastrophic impacts that those can have. We've also recently seen earthquakes in Haiti, New Zealand, and then a few years ago China, that brought a great deal of loss to infrastructure and loss of life as well. So it's becoming very important to the citizens of the United States and across the world to better understand what earthquake risk poses to them and what we can do to mitigate some of that risk and protect ourselves during a catastrophic event. Earthquakes typically occur along plate boundaries. The Earth is composed of several different crustal plates, and as these plates interact with each other, they either slide past each other, crash into each other, or subduct underneath one another. And as they do so, they build up stresses within the boundaries of those plates. And when those stresses are released suddenly, it causes a mass of Earth to shift, and essentially that is what we get when we see an earthquake. Typically worldwide we see earthquakes occur on these plate boundaries. The coast of California is a good example, where the Pacific plate and the North American plate are sliding past each other. In Japan we see the Pacific and the Eurasian plates that are essentially subducting underneath, creating that environment for not only earthquakes but also volcanoes as well. In mid-Missouri and in the central U.S., we're in an environment where we don't have plate boundaries, but we're on the stable part of a continent or a crustal plate. So the earthquake and the seismic relationships are a little bit different in the mid-continent. We don't understand them as well. On the plate boundaries, we have a much better understanding about what causes earthquakes, how to and how to expect the response from the land surface when those earthquakes happen. In the mid-continent, we don't understand that because we don't have a lot of experience. Mid-crustal earthquakes and mid-continent earthquakes are a little more unusual and less frequent than we see along the plate boundaries. The geologic record tells us that there has been a moderate sized earthquake along the New Madrid seismic zone about every 100 years. For a larger earthquake, the geologic record tells us that a larger earthquake occurs along the Madrid seismic zone about every 500 years. And we can step that back through time and see that that's occurred fairly frequently for a number of millennia. The largest of the known earthquakes that have occurred on the Madrid seismic zone were in about 1811 and 1812. There was a series of earthquakes, fairly large earthquakes, that occurred during the months of December, January, and February of those years. And it caused a great deal of upheaval in the region. Of course, the region was largely unpopulated at the time, except for small villages and some communities up the Mississippi River. We hear anecdotal stories about the Mississippi River running backward, about church bells ringing in Boston, cracking sidewalks in various places on the East Coast. And I think you have to really kind of burrow down into the details to understand how much of that is truthful and how much is just anecdotal stories that have been passed down through time. We certainly understand that the course of the Mississippi River was altered. And during the shaking events, there was probably a great upheaval of land and water geysers and sand geysers that occurred through the liquefaction process. And people were probably just scared at that time. So we know that there was a great deal of damage. We know that the earthquake was felt along the East Coast. And so there is truth in there, but we have to better understand really what happened. Now, we're not in the mid-continent here. We don't have to worry about tsunamis, and that's good. But we're also in a geologic environment where those seismic waves produced from an earthquake can travel much farther. That's why when we have an earthquake on New Madrid, it is usually felt several hundred kilometers away. Typically when you have an earthquake on a plate boundary, it's a very localized event, and it's typically not felt very far away, but it can do a great deal of damage very locally. In a New Madrid scenario in the mid-continent, we're looking at a scenario whereby you could expect to see damage much further out, simply because of the nature of the geologic materials there. We live on a very dynamic Earth, and The New Madrid seismic zone may be the only official seismic zone recognized in the state of Missouri, but we frequently have small earthquake events throughout various areas of Missouri. We had one a couple of years ago in Lebanon, Missouri, and it was pretty unexpected for a lot of the citizens down there that felt it, but not completely unexpected. As I mentioned, the Earth's very dynamic. Our crustal plates move all the time, and sometimes they give us a little jerk that can be felt. The Kansas City region experiences earthquakes on occasion. So as far as a seismic zone goes, the New Madrid seismic zone is a recognized region of concentrated earthquakes, but we can certainly expect small earthquakes in various places around the state from time to time. As one can imagine, with the tragedy in Japan and the subsequent tsunami that impacted very seriously the nuclear power generation facilities there, a lot of awareness has been brought to that issue across the United States and quite frankly across the world. In Missouri, we do have one power generation reactor that's located in Callaway County. We also have two smaller reactors, one that's located at the University of Missouri at Columbia and also Missouri University of Science and Technology in Rolla. Those are small reactors that are typically used for research purposes. In Japan, the reactors survived the earthquake very well. From all the information that we have, it appears that the tsunami is really what did most of the damage to the ability of those facilities to continue to operate. The facility in Missouri in Callaway County is located approximately 200 miles away from the New Madrid seismic zone, and this is a significant distance. Also of significance is the fact that the nuclear power plant sits on bedrock material that is much more able to withstand shaking than some of the materials that might be closer to southeast Missouri. Southeast Missouri was one time a large wetland complex associated with the Mississippi River embayment. And as such, it's filled with a lot of softer type sediments that aren't really hard, consolidated bedrock. During a seismic shaking event, these types of sediments can not only slow down seismic waves, but amplify them in a manner that makes the shaking actually more intense and more violent. Structures that are built on bedrock, seismic waves have a tendency to move through bedrock material much more quickly, and therefore the shaking is much less intense. So in our situation in Missouri, we have the plant in Callaway County. It's built on more competent bedrock than we would see in other places in the state. And so we would expect, even in a large earthquake event on New Madrid, that that facility would perform very well in a situation like that. The two research facilities in Missouri would also be expected to perform very well. Again, they're located at a great distance from New Madrid, and they're built in a geologic environment that would withstand shaking very well, so we wouldn't anticipate any problems with that as well. A lot of people ask us, what do we do during an earthquake and how do we prepare? And those are great questions. Typically, if you're in a building, the safest thing to do is stay there. You want to do three things: drop down, take cover underneath something sturdy, cover your head and your neck, and hold on until the shaking subsides and you can evacuate the building. If you're outside, obviously you want to try to remove yourself from a building where you might be subject to something falling off of a building or something like that. So just awareness of your surroundings and just practicing what would I do if I were in my office, at my home, or at a sports event when an earthquake occurred. How would I take action and be prepared? As far as being prepared at home or the office, a lot of things that we do to prepare for other disasters apply to earthquakes. Tornadoes or ice storms, which Missourians are very familiar with. The things that we do to prepare for those: having a few days of food and water, having our emergency contact information available, having critical medicines available to us, and then being prepared to be without electricity for a few days. I mean, these are the same types of things that we would expect the citizens would potentially be facing in the event of a catastrophic earthquake. So as we go through 2011 and next year 2012, we'll be commemorating the 200th anniversary of the earthquakes of 1811, 1812 along New Madrid. So I think it's important that we take this opportunity to just make ourselves aware. We see these events that go on around the globe. It certainly has significant impact in some of those nations and communities. And so being prepared is a good thing that will allow us to be able to manage a disaster of that nature much better, but it will also prepare us for smaller type events where the disaster is not so great, but that we can reach out to our fellow citizens and our communities to help out where that help might be needed. So the 2011-2012 timeframe is an excellent opportunity for us to just raise awareness of the earthquake hazard along New Madrid and bring our communities together to understand what we can do.